Dr. Dutch with the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Welcome to Nachos, wherever you are, whenever you are. And some of you may have noticed that we were off last week, and that's because I was in Washington, D.C. presenting at the AAIDD conference. And that's the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities for those playing acronym bingo at home. It was a meaningful experience, not just because I got to share our work on neuroaffirmation and microaccommodations, but because I met so many young neurodivergent professionals who were already reshaping the future of this field. The energy in those rooms was electric, not always from the official program, but from the quiet hallway conversations, the breakout sessions where real truths were spoken, and the powerful sense that there's a generational shift. It's coming whether the old guard is ready or not. And there's a lot of great work on the horizon, and I can't wait to bring those conversations back to you here at Nachos in the weeks ahead. But today is June 30th, Nacho Knots, the very edge of 1 month and the very beginning of another. The close of LGBTQIA Pride Month and the dawn of Disability Pride Month. A threshold moment, a place where histories overlap, where resistance meets reflection, and where we pause, not just to celebrate who we are, but to consider what it costs to be here at all. In moments like this, I find myself returning to the words that have stayed with me since childhood. Words my father once spoke of with reverence, and they come from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a theologian, educator, and resistor who lived and died during a time of moral crisis. And he wrote, "Silence in the face of evil is evil itself. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act." So again, since I screwed that up, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. It's the kind of quote that doesn't just ask you to think, it asks you to choose. And here at Nachos, that's what we do each week. We explore what it means to choose care in a world that often demands compliance, to choose voice even when it trembles, to choose presence even when we've been told to disappear. Today's episode lives in that in-between, between pride and pride, between masking and unmasking, between rest and righteous resistance. So let's step into this together. Originally spoken during one of history's darkest hours, Bonhoeffer's words remind us that neutrality in the face of harm is never neutral, that not speaking is itself a form of speech, that not acting, especially when we have the ability to, still shapes the world we live in. But for those of us who are neurodivergent, disabled, queer, or multiply marginalized, this kind of speech and action is complicated. We're asked to show up constantly, to advocate, to educate, to correct, and to inspire, often without rest, resources, or reciprocity. We're told to use our voice, but only if we're polite about it. To share our story, but only if it doesn't disrupt the comfort of the status quo. So here we are, between pride and pride, between exhaustion and expression, between silence and speech. Today's episode of Nachos sits right in that space, and it asks, how do we speak up without speaking over ourselves? How do we act without acting against our own bodies and brains? How do we hold truth and tenderness in the same breath? And we'll explore what resistance looks like when it's quiet, what care looks like when it's defiant, and how neuroaffirmation itself can be a form of righteous action. Because sometimes the boldest thing you can do is to say no and mean it. Sometimes it's staying offline. Sometimes it's logging on with boundaries. And sometimes it's just surviving when the world wasn't built for you. Because not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And if you're still here, tired, trying, tangled, triumphant, you're already doing something radical. So I first heard the name of this man, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, not in a classroom, but at the kitchen table. My father used to tell me stories about him, about a young pastor who spoke out against Hitler, who joined a resistance movement grounded in faith, and who eventually imprisoned and executed for refusing to be silent. In our house, Bonhoeffer wasn't just a historical figure. He was a moral compass. He was a reminder that doing the right thing often meant not doing the easy thing. He was spoken of with the kind of reverence usually reserved for saints or soldiers. And my father didn't idolize many people, but Bonhoeffer was different. He wasn't held up as perfect, but he was held up as brave. Now, even as a child, I understood that Bonhoeffer was dangerous to the status quo, and that was the point. He didn't just believe in justice, he risked everything to live justice. That kind of faith, the kind that confronts evil with action, even when the odds are impossible, is something I return to again and again and again, and especially now. Because when you're neurodivergent or disabled or otherwise pushed to the margins, the world often teaches you to stay quiet. It demands you to stay quiet. It demands you to sit still, to comply. But Bonhoeffer's story, and the way my father told it, made something clear. Silence can be complicity. And compliance isn't always virtue. Sometimes the most faithful act is to defy. Sometimes the most righteous thing you can do is refuse to disappear. And as we move from the last flicker of Pride Month into the first spark of disability pride, I find myself returning to those kitchen table stories, not just as inspiration, but as invitation. How can we honor our own defiance? How can we make room for action that is rooted not in burnout, but in alignment with our truth? What does it mean to be righteous and rested? Bonhoeffer's story doesn't let us off the hook, but it also doesn't demand perfection. It asks us to choose, to speak, even to act. Even if we do so with a shaking voice or a wobbly first step, it asks that of us. It demands that of us. And in that way, his story still speaks through history, through voices like my father's, and maybe today through our collective voice. Because today also, interestingly, marks the anniversary of the Night of Long Knives, a turning point in 1934 when Hitler ordered a brutal political purge to consolidate power. Over just a few days, dozens of perceived threats to the Nazi regime were assassinated without trial. Members of his own ranks, political opponents, and anyone deemed inconvenient to the rising machinery of fascism, they were gone. It was a calculated silencing, a demonstration that dissent would be met not with debate, but with violence. This moment in history lives in chilling contrast to the story of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who saw this happen. Where Bonhoeffer represents the moral cost of not resisting, the Night of Long Knives reveals the real world consequences of unchecked power and collective silence. It wasn't just a slaughter of people. It was the burial of public resistance. After that, speaking out became even more dangerous. And for many, it became impossible. And yet, this is the tension we still live with. When systems grow intolerant of critique, when movements demand conformity instead of accountability, and when fear keeps us quiet, history begins to echo. It begins to scream. Bonhoeffer's defiance told to me in childhood as a kind of sacred inheritance, stands in direct protest to the silence that allowed nights like that to happen. The lesson isn't abstract, it's immediate. What we choose not to say, not to do, or not to name has consequences. For those of us navigating invisible struggles, daily microaggressions, or systemic erasure, it may not always feel like we're living in historic times. But the truth is, every moment we act with courage and care, even if that act is small or quiet or boundaried, we push back against the normalization of harm. So on this eve of Disability Pride Month and in the shadow of this grim anniversary, we remember that silence is not neutral. And speaking, even when it shakes us, still matters. All of this, the Bonhoeffer quote, the weight of history, the ache of resistance, the celebration of pride and of disability pride, has been sitting with me in a very real, very current way. Because we're not just talking about theory here. We're building something. We're doing something. So when we're saying we're building something, we actually mean it. As mentioned many times before, this October in Dearborn, Michigan, we're hosting the first ever Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference, a statewide gathering grounded in the principle of justice, rest, access, and community. It's not a corporate diversity showcase. It's not inspiration theater. It's something different, something deeper. It's hopefully going to be a place where disabled and neurodivergent people, from students and self-advocates to parents, educators, clinicians, and community leaders, come together to explore how we survive, connect, and thrive. Now, registration is open at humanities101.org/conference. And the conference is designed with multiple forms of empowerment in mind. Our sessions include everything from workshops on disability disclosure in the workplace to panels on the power of storytelling. From legal insights on rights and protections to hands-on strategies for sensory regulation, executive function, burnout recovery, and energy renewal. We'll hear from educators, therapists, human resource professionals, late diagnosed adults, youth activists, caregivers, students, and people whose expertise comes from lived experience, often across multiple intersections of identity. So this is not a one-size-fits-all gathering. It's a quilt of conversations, each one stitched with care. There'll be expert panels, legal and HR-focused presentations, youth-led discussions, occupational therapy-informed sessions, and lived experience roundtables where stories are honored as a form of resistance. Each room is designed to prioritize accessibility from the ground up. We're looking at captions, sensory-friendly options, mobility supports, and micro-accommodations that reflect the real needs of our community and the people that will be there. And while there won't be a virtual option for this first year, we're working hard to secure that and make sure that that happens going forward in the future. This conference isn't just about showing up. It's about showing up differently, with boundaries, with joy, with snacks and stim toys and sunglasses and mutual care. It's about building community where burnout isn't a badge and rest isn't taboo. So if you've ever longed for a space where your access needs weren't just accepted but expected, if you've ever wondered what it would feel like to lead without having to mask, and if you've ever been told that your story was too much, too personal, or not professional, the MDEC, the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference, is for you. Because not to act is to act. And this is what acting with intention looks like. So you can register today, support someone else's attendance, or help us spread the word. Because building a movement means inviting more people to ride at their own pace, with the safety bar down and the map clearly in view. And this is only the beginning. So we'd love to have you be a part of it. And speaking of showing up differently, You know, I had a rather strange interaction the other day. A guy tried to insult me, not even in a creative or particularly original way, but he kind of huffed in a kind of an upset moment, and he said, "You're always the guy who's talking about neuro-los-osity." And at first I chuckled. I mean, what a thing to be known for, right? Not the guy who's loud or the guy who wears weird socks or the guy who always has snacks or fidgets, but the neuro-los-osity guy. Now, it was meant to be a dig, but something in me, probably the part raised on humanities degrees and poetry anthologies, that part paused. Because here's the thing, if you're going to insult me using a made-up word, you better believe I'm going to go home and unpack it like it's an etymological treasure. Could that be a real word? It felt like one, and I'm sure it has roots. It had rhythm. It had resonance. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this word may not exist in the dictionary, but it exists in the world. It exists in our souls. It exists in our nervous systems. So I sat with it. And what emerged was this: neuro-los-osity. Neuro-los-osity is the quality or condition of neural loosening. It's not a clinical diagnosis or a neurological metric. It's a human process, a becoming. It symbolizes that moments when the mind begins to soften, when the overbound patterns, the scripts we've memorized, the rules we've internalized, the masks that we've molded to our faces as our own, when those things start to melt, when the nervous system exhales, when the body unclenches, when you stop trying to be acceptable and start allowing yourself to be. A lot of people talk about unmasking and then the regression that comes after it, but I believe it's neuro-los-osity. So let's break it down, the root word. Neuro. You know, this is brain, the nervous system, and then loss, from loosen or to lose, to release or let go, and then obviously the osity, the quality or condition of being. So when we look at neuro-los-osity, it's what happens when the overstimulated mind finds a safe space to settle. It's when you unmask without apology. It's when your burnout shifts into relief, not because everything is fixed, but because you stop pretending you're not tired. It's walking into a room without bracing. It's stim toys on the table or on your head and no one is blinking. It's saying, "I don't know," and not feeling ashamed. It's a conference that doesn't demand productivity. It's choosing silence even without the fear of erasure. Now, some might call this indulgent, but I call it liberation. And so, yes, maybe I'm the guy who is always talking about neuro-los-osity. And maybe that's exactly what the world needs more of. Because here's the truth. Neuro-los-osity is not a psychological concept. It's not a medical term. It's not a diagnosis or a treatment plan or a behavioral management strategy. It's not something that can be measured in an fMRI machine or plotted on a chart. It doesn't belong to clinicians or compliance officers. It belongs to us. Neuro-los-osity is a human process. It's a relational ethic, a radical way of saying you do not have to harden to survive. You do not have to clench, contort, camouflage, or collapse. You're allowed to loosen gently, slowly, and inside a community. And you're allowed to do so not just because you are healed or fixed or better, but because you're finally safe enough to be whole, to be you, to be real. It's a refusal of the old frameworks, the ones that saw neurodivergent people as puzzles to be solved or problems to be fixed. It's a language that rejects the pathology paradigm and instead asks, What does it mean to be in the right relationship with yourself, your body, your needs in the world? Where psychology might pathologize emotional dysregulation, Neuro-los-osity invites us to ask, what were you trying to hold together for so long? And what might it feel like if you stop? Where systems might view masking as a success strategy, Neuro-los-osity sees it as a wound and honors the courage it takes to begin to unmask and deal with that scar tissue. Where traditional therapeutic models focus on outcomes and intervention, Neuro-los-osity is about emergence, not as treatment, but as truth, as trust, as the slow and sacred art of letting go. Because here's what happens when we reclaim language. We take power back from systems that profited off of our silence. We name experiences that silence hasn't yet found words for, but our bodies and our souls and our minds already understand. We make space for those who have always lived in between diagnoses, between cultures, between coping and collapse. And we give those people a word that says, you are not broken, you are becoming. So Neuro-los-osity is a relational ethic because it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It unfolds in the presence of care. It asks, who makes it safe for you to exhale? What conditions help you shed the layers you never asked to put on? And what environments allow your nervous system to relax, not into nothingness, but into truth? We don't get there through compliance. We get there through connection. So no, this isn't about recovery in the way institutions define it. It's about reclamation. Reclamation of ourself. Reclamation of rhythm. Reclamation of breath. And if someone wants to mock that, if someone wants to call that just a made-up word, then let them. They're all made up. Because most of the words that ever changed the world started out as whispers in someone else's mouth. And this one feels like freedom. So Neuro-los-osity may sound abstract at first, but if you've ever felt it, you know it's real. It's that moment when a friend notices your eyes darting in overwhelm and silently hands you a noise-canceling headphone or a snack. It's the coworker who learns to email instead of call because they know phone anxiety isn't something you need to explain for the 100th time. It's the teacher who redesigns the classroom lighting without being asked. It's the space where take your time actually means take your time. This kind of care, this collective loosening, isn't therapeutic. It's relational. It's like the PB&J framework. And it's happening all around us when we allow ourselves to notice it. So at the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference, we are deliberately designing for Neuro-los-osity. Not in name, perhaps, but certainly in spirit. It's in the layout of the rooms. It's in the sessions that begin with permission to stim and to take breaks and to stand and to stretch and to leave and to return. It's in the workshops that don't just teach, but to invite. It's not just about learning strategies. It's about being seen. And so when we sit in a circle where someone talks about the moment they stopped hiding their AAC device, when you hear a panelist describe finally feeling pride in their flapping hands, when someone shares how they turned down a job because it didn't honor their mental health, and the room nods in solidarity instead of shame, that's Neuro-los-osity. When we build a world where people can unmask without unraveling, rest without retreating, and speak without softening their truth to fit someone else's comfort, that's Neuro-los-osity. And it doesn't come from programs or products or metrics. It comes from people. And every time we honor someone's need instead of requiring their endurance, every time we ask, what would safety look like for you? every time we say, you don't have to justify why you're tired today. We're not just being kind. We're participating in something radical. We're saying you deserve to loosen. Not after you've worked harder and not after you've proven yourself, but now. Right? And speaking of building spaces where people can loosen, speak up, and belong, we're not just doing that at the MDEC. We're doing it all summer long. On July 29th, I've been invited to speak on the steps of the Michigan State Capitol as part of the Breaking Barriers event, an annual gathering that brings together disabled leaders, advocates, and allies from across the state. It's hosted in partnership with the Self Advocates of Michigan, SAM, where I serve on the board and as PR director. And while this technically isn't part of my faculty role, I see it as an essential extension of what I believe education is really about: public service, collective liberation, and learning that moves beyond the classroom and the bricks and goes into the soul, the heart, and the mind. Now, this event is about more than just speeches or puffery. It's a day of visibility, community, and action. And it's in a space, too, often overlooks, or in a space that often overlooks disabled voices, the seats of power. So we're going to be showing up in full color, full sound, and full presence. And later that evening, we're going to be gathering again, this time in celebration at the Lansing Lugnuts game, where our community will be recognized on the field as part of the Disability Pride Month. And there's also an art show. Okay? And this art show spotlights disabled artists and creators, offering chances to witness how Neuro-los-osity lives, not just in our own stories, but in the textures, colors, and forms. It's another way of saying we are here and we create. We do stuff. We're productive. So if you want to come, if you want to march, cheer, paint, sit in the stands, or just be present in this part of the community, join the NACHOS Discord. I've got the links posted for the registration. There'll be maybe information on ride shares and accommodations. All of that stuff, we can work on it as a community. If you are a Michigan resident, all of that stuff will be taken care of, right? If you're traveling from out of state, reach out to me. But whatever level feels right for you, your body, your energy, and your capacity to show up, we want you to show up. Because speaking up isn't always about grabbing a microphone. Sometimes it's just about showing up on your terms, in your truth, with your community beside you. So if you haven't already, now is a perfect time to join the NACHOS Discord, because that's where all these links live. Access for details to the Lugnuts game, the Breaking Barriers thing, even information about the Yale Casey summer camp program that I am a trail leader, trail guide, and will be presenting the week of July 7th through 13th for the third week, the Language Artifact Week, for the Cultural Autism Studies at Yale Summer Self-Care Series. All of this stuff happens in the Discord, and it's also where real community conversations happen. The after episode reflections, the quiet rins, the soft landings, the memes, the midnight affirmations, the angry rants, the stuff that doesn't always make it into the script or onto the screen, but absolutely makes it into the movement. And while you're riding that wave of connection, don't forget to subscribe to NACHOS. Leave a rating or a review. Share this episode with someone who might need a little loosening. Let people on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, all of those places know that you're part of this community. Your support helps keep this platform going and helps the stories we tell ripple out farther than any algorithm can predict. And if you're feeling especially generous today, we'd love if you could chip into our GoFundMe for the Michigan Disability Empowerment Conference. This fund helps us cover accessibility costs, travel support, the food that we're going to be giving, the swag bags, all of that stuff, and the very low registration cost of $5 for all the participants. Every dollar goes directly to making this conference possible and supporting the broader work of neuroaffirmation and disability empowerment across Michigan. And speaking of that, there are some other very, very big things on the horizon. Some of them even landing on the same day as the Lansing event that I can't quite announce yet. But trust me, they are coming. They're bold, they're big, they're affirming, they're going to help us all greatly. And they're a part of our long-term vision to make Michigan the most neuro-affirming state in the country by 2035. This isn't just about policy or programs. It's about people. It's about planting seeds now for a future where no one has to unlearn their identity just to survive. A future where neuro-los-osity isn't rare, it's normal. A future where you can take your full self into any room and be met with care, not correction. And we're not dreaming of that future alone. We're building it with organizations like Dream Dearborn and Disability Rights Detroit or Disability Rights Michigan, Self-Advocates of Michigan, right? And we're building it with people like you. So what do we do with all of this? With Bonhoeffer's warnings ringing in our ears, with history whispering that silence is not safety, with lived experience reminding us that survival itself can be an act of resistance, with new words like neuro-los-osity, offering a way to name the slow, sacred process of softening and becoming. What do? Well, we hold it. We hold all of it in tension, in tenderness, and in community, because that's what NACHOS is. It's not just a podcast or a YouTube channel. It's not just a conversation. It's a container for those of us who are tired of disappearing. It's a place to explore how we show up without breaking ourselves in the process. How we speak even when the words are shaky, even when the world doesn't want to listen. How we act even when the systems are slow to change or to change at all. And how we care for ourselves, not instead of justice, but as a part of justice. This episode wasn't just a reflection on a quote or an announcement of events. It was a map. A map that shows what it looks like to move from history to action, from masking to unmasking, from isolation to interdependence, from abstract policy talk to art shows and baseball games and communities built on joy. And if you look closely, that map points to something bigger, a shared future that we are all sketching together. A Michigan, a Midwest, a United States, a world where neuroaffirmation isn't radical, it's standard. A world where speaking up isn't just seen as disruptive, but as deeply human. A culture where rest, release, and relationship are part of the design, part of the structure. We're building towards 2035, towards something bold. And today, whether you joined us from a quiet corner, a long drive, or a moment of burnout, you were a part of that. And to me, that matters. And so as we wind down today, I want to leave you with this. If you've ever been told that your needs were too much, if you've ever left a room because you couldn't stay masked 1 second longer, if you've ever stayed silent, not because you didn't care, but because your nervous system couldn't take another blow, know this: you're not failing. You're discerning. There's wisdom in your quiet. There's resistance in your rest. And there's power in your boundaries. You don't need to speak in every moment to be counted. You don't need to explain your worth to be worthy. Whether you're marching on Capitol steps or sitting quietly at home with your noise machine and your weighted blanket, you are a part of this movement. And you're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to slow down. You're allowed to unmask, unbind, and unbecome everything that never was truly you. You are not too sensitive. You're attuned. You're not overreacting. You are reacting to systems that never were designed with you in mind. You're not a machine. You were never meant to be one. So let today be the day you loosen just a little. Breathe a little deeper. Speak a little louder or softer or not at all, and trust that the act itself still counts. Let today be the day you stop waiting for permission to rest. Let it be the day you donate, share, or show up in whatever way your capacity allows. Let it be the day you choose connection over compliance and care over cope. Because self-care is not selfish. It's revolutionary. It's sacred. And by God, it's your right. You are a part of something beautiful, Nacho Knots, something bigger than any one event, any one episode, or any podcast or person. You're a part of a community dreaming and building a world where neuroaffirmation isn't just an idea, but it's a lived reality. So if this episode moved you, if this work matters to you, if you believe in a future where no one is pathologized for being fully themselves, please consider giving to our GoFundMe, joining our Discord, or just sending this to someone who needs it. Your generosity is not just financial, it's relational. It keeps this work going. It tells us that you're with us. And we are all so grateful that you're with us. So until next time, Nacho Knots, loosen gently, live fiercely, and never, ever forget, you are not broken. You are becoming.